Hello, and welcome to the Healing with Charlie podcast, where we chat about all things relationships and attachment styles. I'm your host, Charlie, and today we're chatting with Lauren Plante. Lauren is a great friend, and she's also a certified mindset and life coach, Reiki practitioner, and neuro-linguistic programmer. She has a background in working with human behavior, which is where she actually learned to understand cognitive patterns and how they can be rewired. By healing from chaos, she's helped countless people find peace and fulfillment in their careers and relationships. Lauren and I first connected a little over 1 year ago when she invited me to be on her podcast when I was still super fresh to content and attachment healing. So today, Lauren and I, we've kind of come full circle. I'm excited to have Lauren here with us today. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlie. That introduction just made me smile from ear to ear. It just brought me back. This is so fun to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited and I'm glad we had a chance to reconnect. Again, it's been a little over a year and a half since we first had a chance to kind of connect and chat about life, relationships, attachment styles, and a lot of changes have happened in both of our lives since then. So I'm really happy to kind of dive into that today. To kind of kick things off, Lauren, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and maybe who you are?
Sure. Yes. So Lauren Plante, mindset and life coach, Reiki practitioner. I found this work this work found me, really. When I graduated college, I was going to school to be a speech pathologist, but I took a deep interest in neuro and human behavior. So I went right into human behavior as a human behavior analyst, where I saw some gnarly stuff. I was working with kids with PTSD, and that was the first time I got to understand how much our past and our upbringing impacts our behaviors. And I saw that in an exaggerated form in children. And then I moved on to be a neurological education specialist. And that was where I worked with kids with severe neurological disabilities on opening up the pathways. And that was really, really cool experience too, because then I just took those two things and I applied them to myself. I was really wanting to get out of the 9 to 5 structure. I am one of those people who has that personality like yours that cannot be put in a box. Do not put me in a box. And so I went on to be a real estate agent. And from taking all the skills I learned in human behavior and neuro, I was really successful very quickly. I actually made a lot of money very quickly, and I got a little lost in the sauce, if you will. And we'll definitely talk about that because it kind of took my soul away. And I ended up creating a team in real estate, which is where I found my passion for coaching, because I didn't train my team and ended up coaching my team. And then I bought some properties and I created a little nest egg for myself, a little savings. And then I quit because I realized for the first time, like, I'm not happy. I have everything I ever wanted and dreamt of, but I don't even know my own name anymore. When you ask me, who are you? What do you do? I do real estate. That's it. I own houses. I do this. I do that. And I don't know my name anymore. And so I found that through a Reiki healing session. And that's what made me want to become a Reiki practitioner, because I knew something was wrong and I was looking anywhere to find answers. And I met a Reiki practitioner and she's like, let's do a session. And I hadn't cried in I don't even know how long. And because I was just suppressing everything to the point where there were points where I had to go to the hospital because my back hurt so bad. Like my body was becoming debilitated because I was just suppressing everything and working so hard. And at the end of this Reiki session, I asked her to leave the room because I wasn't ready to cry in front of anybody. And the thing that came out of my mouth is I was shaking and crying. And I was like, all I want is love. And that's the moment I realized I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I was looking to heal and fill a void inside myself through external, short-term satisfactions, money, status, material, my Jimmy Choo bag, you name it. And just kind of in that real estate world. So then I took a 6-month sabbatical, found myself, had an awakening, and now here I am as a coach.
Wow, that is really incredible to learn because obviously the last time we met, it was mostly about me. So I didn't actually know any of that about yourself. So that's really inspiring to hear. I, as you said, I have a really similar experience to that. Like I myself, going to school, getting an education, getting the degree, and pursuing a career in areas that I thought would fulfill me just because I thought they would give me, the house, the bank account, the car, the wife, and all of the lifestyle that is associated with success. I too quickly realized that I felt like an outsider. I felt like even though I wanted those things because everyone else wanted those things around me, and some people wanted those for me, that I had to actually strive for those. And I didn't realize that up until a certain point, I was myself, just kind of doing things because I wanted to make other people happy. I wasn't really happy with myself. And it's interesting that we both kind of had a similar revelation in that regard because, and again, I'm not against people having success or having nice things, but I think there is something about the society we live in and capitalism as our structure for the economy that kind of pushes people to really push down their feelings, their emotions, even their most human desires, just to kind of get that bag, just to kind of fill that bank account and get more commas. And so I'm
Yes.
kind of curious a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you think it is maybe about your earlier life and maybe what's happened to you that kind of led you down that path in the first place? Because we don't just, fall into this. Like things happen to us early in life that kind of put us on this path. So I'm curious, what sort of revelations have you had about your early life, maybe in childhood, that have kind of led you down that path to where you are now?
The first thing that comes up is two words, and you're very familiar with these two words: emotional unavailability.
Hmm.
And something you just said really, really hit me because, like you said, this capitalism and everybody just kind of like going and for their desires and going for the material. And I've learned this very recently through all of my research. There is nothing wrong with wanting things. There is nothing wrong with wanting the most amazing partner and for them to have big muscles or a beautiful body or whatever it is, or for them to have all these things, these desires that you have in yourself. And I always felt bad for like desiring a partner that had everything that I wanted internally and externally. I always felt bad for desiring like a beautiful home, luxury, and all of these things, especially after my experience through work.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with having those things. But when all you know is to have those things, you don't even know that there's emotion. There's an internal world too. We have two worlds. There's the internal and the external world. And I think that's what happened for me was that I didn't know what love was because there was so much emotional unavailability, so much lack of emotion, so much lack of connection growing up because in the world, especially, I think that's why our generation is healing so much, is because the prior generation doesn't know how to connect, not know how to feel their emotions. We've lost that skill and we're human beings, but we've become robots.
Hmm.
And because of that, I only knew how to seek externally for love. How do I get that validation that I never got because nobody knew how to tell little Lauren how amazing and how wonderful she is and look into her eyes and where you can feel it. You feel
Hmm.
it when somebody looks at you and says, "You're beautiful, you're amazing, you're wonderful." I didn't have that. And it's not because my parents didn't think that about me, it's because they didn't know how to emotionally connect with me. And I think a lot of us struggle with this. There's a lot more that goes into it. I have my father left when I was young. There's abandonment wounds there, rejection and abuse and all that as well. But I think to keep it simple, like a big part of the reason I was seeking externally was because I just didn't know that there was an internal world. And this big awakening that's coming up in the world, people are starting to understand like, oh, you can want really nice things and you can have those things. There's nothing wrong. The world and the universe wants you to claim that, but get your
Hmm.
priorities right, right?
Yeah.
Where's your
Yeah.
foundation set? Like you can only fill the house with beautiful things if you know how to build a foundation and build the structure to the house that is going to stay strong. And that is having emotional intelligence, that is being able to connect, that is having that maturity, that foundation for yourself, that when things don't go well, or when all of your material things, you lose them all one day, you still have you. And that's where I think that came from for me.
That's really deep. And I think you are right over the target because without having a sense of abundance within you first, you can fill your house with all of the nice things and you can still feel empty inside. Like it really doesn't matter the physical possessions you have. Like, sure, there are things that we all need. Like, we need a roof over our head, we need electricity, water, internet, and food. Those are fundamentals, not really what I'm referring to. We kind of get lost in the pursuit of like having the bigger TV or the bigger sofa or more space or the newer car or the newer iPhone, which doesn't necessarily help us connect with other people in the ways that we think they do. Like very often, the media is telling us that having these things will connect you to other people. Like you can use a car to go visit your family. Yeah, that's great. But if you don't connect with your family, like you don't really make that connection about the value that the car offers. If you don't have a great conversation style with you and your partner in home, having a nice sectional sofa isn't going to really bring you two closer together. You're probably going to sit on the opposite ends of the couch, right? So it really does come down to how people perceive themselves. And that is usually the filter and lens to which they both perceive and receive other people. And I think you're right over the target with that. And so that kind of leads me into the next topic. I'm kind of curious, like, how did that journey let you discover like your own attachment style and what maybe happened in your life that kind of played a role in that?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, my father, when my parents got divorced when I was around 9 years old, my father, I think maybe just wasn't meant to be a father. Of course, everything in this world happens for a reason, but he just couldn't handle it. It was too much for him. He was abusive, he was neglectful, and he had a lot of anger and issues himself. And so when I was 10, nonetheless, though, which is sometimes the hardest part in childhood, is I still loved him very, very much. And that's what I knew to be love. That's what I knew to be. That's the first male figure in my life. Mostly the only male figure. I can't even remember many other male figures I had to look to as I was younger. And he left when I was 10. He moved to Asia, Thailand, and I never saw him again. And I think through the rejection, through the neglect, because there were a lot of moments where not only was he physically abusive, but like if I ever tried to hug him or love him or sit on his lap, like he would push me away. And so I think this sent my brain a message that you like love is not for you, or it's only for a moment. And when it's for a moment, like grab onto it and hold it because it could go away in any moment. Because I didn't know what day my dad was going to come home and he was actually going to hug me back. I would wait outside for him to come home from work every day, his red truck, and he'd pull up and I'd run into his arms and he'd either hug me back or he'd push me away. And I never knew which one I was going to get. And I think that carried into my anxious attachment style. So I never wanted to get too close to a man. But when he pushed me away, I so desperately needed him to embrace me or hug me or give me that validation that he's not going to leave, that he doesn't hate me, that he's not going to hurt me. And so I never was the type. I was a closet anxious. I was never the type to like, I would never text a million times. I would be more of the type of like, oh, you're not going to answer me, then I'm not going to answer you for 2 days. Try me.
Yeah.
You're not leaving me before I leave you. I will leave you first, hands down. Like I would never let a man leave me again. I would never let a man break my heart again until my most recent relationship, which I think was a pretty groundbreaking experience for me because I finally let myself get there. But that was the pattern that was the pattern that ended up playing out in every single one of my relationships.
Mm.
1 minute he'd be open and loving, and then the next minute be gone. And I couldn't really put a finger on it. And a lot of us who go through this, I know a lot of my fellow anxious friends, we can't put a finger on it. It happens so quickly, and we're like, what's happening? Because
Mm-hmm.
he's just telling me how beautiful I was and saying how much he wanted to come over, and now he's here, and now he doesn't even want to sit next to me. And so it took me so long to understand like what's going on and why is this feeling so like comfortable? Like, why do I want to stay even more now? And why, when a man really likes me or was really interested in me, why am I so turned off by that? It's because it was so unfamiliar.
Mm.
And so I don't know where my pattern is now, but the anxious attachment style is definitely one that I've played out, and I've healed a lot, like through my relationships one by one, though painful, and breakups are hard. You get better as long as you start to integrate what it is that you learn about attachment styles.
Yeah, no, and I think you really touched on an important point there because as someone that creates content on a regular basis about attachment styles, about anxious and avoidant relationships, I see people who comment on videos from a place of hurt, from a place of shame. And they'll sometimes say things like, and this goes both ways, like both anxious and avoidant people shouldn't date anyone until they've fully healed. They shouldn't be with anyone until they work on themselves or until they get therapy. And it's always some sort of variation of that. And I understand why people say that. I totally get it. But for me, how I view relationships is there when you are unhealed and maybe you don't have access to therapy, they kind of are like exposure therapy in themselves because each relationship and each breakup that you go through, as you said, you become better, not just at managing the breakup, but also managing your emotions in the process. And that is one of the ways where I think like relationships can be healing. A, because you have to go through a certain degree of pain and hardship in order to know what wounds you have in the first place. But B, without those relationships, you wouldn't be able to work on them because they wouldn't come up to the surface, right? And so for you to say that, you know, each and every relationship serves a purpose in that way, I think is really powerful and it sends a really positive message because I've worked with many people who have said that after they've dated an anxious person or an avoidant person, whatever, that they don't want to date anymore. They've given up. They don't want to have anything to do with other people. And I think it's why we're seeing a lot of people not get into relationships anymore, partly due to like the overexposureness of social media and dating apps and all of that stuff. And plus, also, it's really expensive to be in a relationship right now. That too. And we'll get into the economic side near the end. But when it comes to healing, I think it's really important to consider that relationships, it is impossible to heal outside of them. You know, you can do a lot of work around awareness. You can work with professionals like yourself or myself or therapists, but until you are actually in the moment where somebody is triggering you and you have that opportunity to rewire that programming, you're not going to actually be fully healed. Like I've worked with many people who left relationships with avoidance and said, "Oh, I'm healed now." It's like, no, you're not. You're just not triggered. And that's a tough
Exactly.
conversation, right?
That's
Yeah.
such an important point. And like, I just want to jump in here because you're describing my 4-step framework because I focus on breaking patterns as a coach. First step is healing the limiting belief, whatever that belief was, right? Like my belief in my relationship was like love is not for me or
Mhm.
I'm not worthy of love. And then the fear is the next step. And the fear for me was rejection, abandonment. And then the behavior is like, don't come too close, but don't go too far. And then I get this undesired outcome of this halfway love. And I keep replaying the cycle. And so, like you said, like limiting belief, fear, then behavior, then the undesired outcome, like you have to change the behavior. You have to practice. Like once you do the healing all inside your home in the safety of your own confinements and you do the mindset rewiring, you have to go out there and practice and put that stuff to work. And so you nailed it. Like you cannot just sit at home and think that like your next person is going to be your person.
Mhm.
You don't really know that. I thought that. I was like, third person I ever date is going to be it. My last relationship was that third person, and it wasn't it. And I
Yeah.
really thought he was going to be it because I decided that's the last one.
Mhm.
Well, I had more to heal if I was going to be in that healthy, loving relationship that I've been manifesting for so long. The universe wants to give me exactly what I want, and I keep asking for it. So they gave me a lesson instead. And
Mhm.
you have to. And I do think people should stop complaining. I mean, I don't think a level of, and I don't know if that was harsh, but I do think that people should
It's
stop
honest.
complaining a little bit. And I do think that people should treat one another with more respect and more kindness, yes, and become more aware. But like, how are you supposed to know when you came from a world that was probably full of that's how you act, and you have to
Mhm.
go out there and learn, and you're just as much to blame as the person that is doing it to you, because they hold the very lesson that you need, because every person in front of you is a mirror, as
Yep.
tough as that is to hear sometimes.
Yeah, it is one of the hardest conversations I had with myself as I was going through my breakup a little over 2 years ago, because I was stuck in this phase where I was just really focusing on the other person, how they abandoned me, how much it hurt to be alone, and therefore they were the bad person because of it.
Mhm.
But it completely blindsided me to all of the ways in which I actually wasn't the best person to be with leading up to that breakup. And it wasn't until I actually took time, and this was huge thanks to my therapist, Quentin. If you're ever watching this, thank you so much.
We love
But
you.
they they have helped me realize like how being stuck in that mindset of blaming other people, but also being a victim, was in itself a limiting belief. It also prevented me from taking accountability and thinking like, hey, even though that happened, I can still change myself and be open to connection. And that gave me the mindset and the tools to navigate relationships, because there were people I dated after her who came and went just as fast, and I could spot then the signs. Oh, you might be an avoidant. I have to be cautious, but I'm still going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Those people didn't end up working out for one reason or another. Sometimes it's because they left, sometimes it was because of me. But each and every single relationship was a lesson. And ultimately, all of those relationships were a lesson in that something I was doing or they were doing was blocking me from receiving some form of love that my inner child wanted. And that's kind of like what your work talks about. You really do talk about receiving blocks. And basically they're like our inability to receive from other people. And I'm kind of curious, maybe you can expand on that for people that might be new to this concept.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. If you have a receiving block, you have a resistance to receiving. We'll talk about success and love, because that's majority what our work is around. And you have a hard time seeing that you're worthy of receiving the good things in life. And that may be because you don't know what that's like. You don't have a capacity that's able to hold for good and great things. Or whenever things were going really good, or when something was going really good, a really traumatic and terrible event happened. So joy and pleasure, happiness, love, success is all deemed in your mind as a really bad thing.
Hmm.
And I can bring it back to me as an example. What I realized, and as an anxious who was choosing avoidant men, and I ended up in this halfway love affair, is that while I found that my partner had a resistance to giving love, even if he gave it to me, I don't know that I would have been able to receive it or handle it. I think I would have broke up with him.
Hmm.
I just kind of wanted to win the battle. And that's because I always ended up in these halfway love affairs, because I didn't know how to receive and he didn't know how to give. And I think I think I'm learning how to receive love, but love is foreign to me,
Mhm.
especially from a male, like real true love. And like when I say real true love, like a looking in your eyes and saying, I love you forever. And we're going to work until the day we die to make this work. And I promise you that. And they mean it with all their heart. And I remember talking to my friend, and I said, if he even said that to me, I think I would have exploded because I just couldn't handle it.
Mhm.
My capacity was not large enough. And so when you have this little container, but you want these big things, that's when self-sabotage comes up, procrastination. You mess it up for yourself or you avoid it because your space is too small. So in order to be able to receive that, you have to learn how to expand your space and take it slow. So if I was conscious of that, I probably would have tried to practice and probably would have told him about it. I didn't really understand. I didn't know until after we broke up. So he gave me many gifts. That breakup gave me many gifts, but it was one time that stuck out to me where we were at this farmer's market and I was looking at this this jewelry and he's like, you want it? I'll buy it for you. And I just shut down. I was like, no, I don't want it. All of a sudden, I don't want it. And he's like, what? Why not? Like, try it on. And I like tried it on. It was so uncomfortable. And that was the moment we walked away. And I was like, I think I have a hard time receiving. I was like, that was really kind of you to offer. No, he's not really into this work. And he was like, oh, that's weird. Like
Mm.
there was no really help on his end for me to like figure that out, which is okay. He just wasn't conscious of it. Neither was I, but I started to pick up on it.
Mm.
And it's uncomfortable. And a good way to understand this is like when somebody gives you a compliment, like how comfortable are you receiving that?
Mhm.
Viscerally get uncomfortable and you just want to hide and crawl in a hole. Are you truly genuinely like, thank you so much? Like, I really appreciate that. Like, I was thinking that the other day about myself and you just validated me.
Mm.
And those are the moments you start to realize like, oh, okay, I'm starting to learn how to receive. So start with something small, like a compliment or receiving a gift, or even when a guy or a girl holds a door for you, like really receiving that and thanking it. I did a 21-day receiving challenge with a group of women. I think we had like 40 women in there. And every single day we wrote down 3 ways that we received. And it was something as small as I received safety on my drive home from work today. And it's just being
Mm.
able to start to recognize what you receive every day, whether that be from source, whether that be from a person, whether that just be from yourself, that you put yourself in this safe home, you have running water, all of these beautiful things. And when you start to recognize these things, your capacity will start to grow. And then you could start practicing with another person. And it's really beautiful.
Wow, that is incredible. And I can definitely see where many people are unaware of the receiving blocks in their life because it is so subtle, right? It isn't, you don't become aware of it until something happens as a result of it. So you have to kind of work your way backwards in order to understand, like, oh, this could be a receiving block. Like when people compliment me, I kind of just shut it down or I make it seem smaller. Oh, you like my outfit? Oh, it's nothing. It's just from the thrift store, sort of thing. It's seemingly innocent, but it comes from a place that is not so innocent on the inside. It's designed to keep you small, to keep you in a place that you believe you should be stuck in. And that is one of the ways where, at first, when I was going through my own healing journey and your content really stuck out to me, was like, there might be something to this in the context of my healing journey for attachment, like receiving love and what it would be like to actually receive the love that I want from someone, but also being able to give it to someone. Because a decent part of the conversation in the attachment theory community is so many people want avoidance to work on themselves, just communicate. But their inability to communicate doesn't come because they don't know how to communicate. It really comes from a place of being afraid of receiving intimacy, but also giving it to other people, kind of as you said in your personal experience. But when it comes to anxious people, And this is going to be some tough love, not harsh, but tough in the sense that it's honest. It's that sometimes we as anxious people, when I was anxious during my breakup, I thought the onus was always on the avoidant because it was easier to demonize them. It was easier to blame them for my shortcomings because it was that way it was just easier to keep the focus on them than to acknowledge what work I would have to do when I actually do receive that intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that in the most loving way because we can sometimes, when we're stuck in our anxious mindset, really put the blame and responsibility on other people because it's often easier to do that than to take the steps necessary to receive the intimacy we so desire in life. And it wasn't until I had that mindset shift and sort of like that awakening where I began to realize, like, I think this is why so many people like me stay in relationships where we're unfulfilled, unhappy, and our needs are unmet because it's easier to try hard to earn that love than it is to simply walk away and find the right person who's going to give that. Because the right person who's going to give that is then going to turn the tables on me and bring out all of the ways in which I'm imperfect and I have limited capacity to receive and give. And I think it's really a great message that you've shared about how to reframe that mindset in daily life, but also in relationships. I'm also curious, like, for the people who listen to my content, many of them are going through breakups. What are some of the ways, and you kind of touched on this, what are some of the ways that they can reframe their breakup in the context of receiving blocks to hopefully set themselves up for success in their next relationship?
Mm-hmm. When it comes to a breakup, I can speak highly to this because I just went through a breakup 7 months ago. And we broke up because he told me he couldn't fall in love with me, which is one of the hardest things for a person to hear, especially an anxious. Talk about validating your limiting belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so it hurt. And breakups, they hurt. Let them hurt. You cannot even get to reframing anything until you cry every single day. It hurts every single day. You look like a loony bin. It doesn't matter what happens. Like, you hop on your work calls and then you hop off, you cry some more. And then you cry in the morning before work and you cry in the evening after work. Whatever you have to do to release all that pain, because if you don't now, you will have to do it later. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Past breakup hurt so bad, one, because of those words, but two, because I didn't cry for my other two, because I never let my heart get broken.
Mm.
And for the first time, I opened my heart and I let it get broken because I knew it needed to happen. It doesn't make it suck any less. So let it suck. And then once that pain has been dripping out of you, you can start to ask yourself, after all of the anger, after you punched all the pillows, what role did I play in this? It's a hard question to ask. But what role did I have in choosing this partner and remaining in this relationship? And trust yourself. You did it for a reason. And it's because you needed the lesson. What lesson can I learn? Write down all of the lessons and write down all of the reasons you never want to be with this person again. So then you can look at that and say, oh, okay, forwards, not backwards. I don't want to go back there. These are my non-negotiables. I love EFT tapping. That is something that I really enjoy. Have you ever heard of EFT tapping?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, cool. So if any of the listeners don't know what it is, you can check it out online. There's tons of videos about it. But you start to understand through post-breakup, post-emotional release, okay, what put me in this position? What role did I play? Why did I choose this person? And then I just started tapping every day. Although I feel fear, I am worthy of love. Although I feel fear, I am worthy of love. And whatever it might be, although I feel resistance, I am worthy of feeling loved and desired. And it's just teaching your brain that the new things that are very foreign to you. You did not believe that before. But now from this breakup, you realize what you don't want and that's not for you. and what is for you is possible. And it's all about opening your mind to the possibilities. And that's it. It's so easy because all you have to do is know that it's possible to have what you want, but you have to let yourself have that. So that's why, although I feel fear or although I feel resistance, I deserve blank is so important, because you need to recognize that you feel the fear, that you feel the resistance, that fear of success, that fear of love, and that fear of receiving. And then tell yourself what you are worthy of, because there's blocks in there and you want to start to rewire those. And so if you tell yourself that and you write yourself these things and you write yourself love notes and letters, another important thing is do something that you love, like self-care, making new friends. Start filling up your own voids because you reached out of desperation for that relationship, for this halfway love or for this non-aligned love for a reason. And it's probably because there are holes inside of your body that need to be filled by you and you only, so that you can not latch onto somebody else's life, but share a life, which I think is a key point. Love is not about latching on and being with them because they'll pay for things, right? Or because they'll meet your emotional needs or your physical needs or anything of that nature. It's so that you can share in a beautiful love together and make some impact in the world, whether that be through having kids or just being an inspiration of love to others, or maybe you do work together or charity together, things like that. And so I'd say those are the two major things, like some EFT tapping, some mindset rewiring, acknowledging the emotion, the fear, the resistance, and then telling yourself what you're worthy of. And then also taking on new habits that are going to fill those voids that you once had, so that you're no longer seeking out of desperation and lack, you're seeking out of abundance and love.
Wow, that is amazing. I think you really touched on some great points there. One that kind of came up immediately was like the element of stress and how it can play a role in the background of those relationships, and how we may not be aware of how we can kind of have an unhealthy relationship with stress. Like most people don't have a healthy relationship with stress, but arguably, if you did have a healthier relationship with it, you'd probably live a lot longer than if you didn't. So I'm kind of curious because you kind of mentioned in the background there about how love isn't necessarily about latching on, but sometimes for people with attachment styles, at least insecure ones, um, we can sometimes not be aware that we latch onto stress as an element in our daily life. And speaking on your anxious attachment style, um, what are some of the ways in which you found yourself sort of addicted to stress or chaos? Because I'm sure growing up in a chaotic household, that was sort of like a common theme. And that's what it was like for me too. So I'm sure people would be interested in hearing about that experience.
Yes, big recovering of addiction of stress, chaos, toxicity, suffering. That is a big thing. The high highs, the low lows, the inconsistency. And if you, like I explained earlier, my father, one day he loved me, one day he didn't. And so that's inconsistency.
Mhm.
And so my mind was wired for it. It's like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. That's love. It's a learned behavior. And there's two ways that we can pick up patterns. One, through a learned behavior, which is watching something happen in our household or watching a behavior from our caregivers or the people that we look to learn from, or two, driven from our wounds or our traumas. And so for me, I took this deep journey of closing the gap. It took a long time. Like, I wasn't just addicted to chaos in my relationships, in the fights and the arguments and the amazing love bombing, but then all of a sudden we hated each other, but then it was another love bomb, and it was this tug of war. It is such a dopamine hit, because when the highs are high, they're so high. When the lows are low, they're so low. And I played that out in my work. How you do one thing is how you do everything. That's a pattern. I played that out in my work. for a while, I was doing it with my health, where like I'd eat great for like all week. And then on the weekends, I just go buck wild on the junk food. And so these patterns, they'll follow us until you learn to close the gap. And so the first thing I did was I started attacking my health. This was all subconscious. I just knew that I wanted to be healthy and I wanted it to be sustainable. And I was sick of my nervous system being all out of whack through the food I ate. So I said, okay, how do I become the healthiest version of myself? And how do I also like break this pattern in my eating and in my diet and in my care for my body? So I started doing it there. And then I started doing it in other areas of my life that I can do with just myself. But a therapist said to me one time, she's like, it's really easy to do things when other people are involved, isn't it? I was like, yeah, it is. So I was like, I did it with my health. Why can't I do it with a relationship in my career? And she's like, there's other people involved, which means there's big triggers. And so with my career, I think it's awareness. I think that's the point of getting a coach or getting support or listening to these podcasts or listening to videos. If you don't know what's going on inside your internal being, then you're never going to be able to pick up on it. And so meditation is one thing that I highly recommend. Slowing yourself down, even if it's a walking meditation or a dancing meditation or a movement meditation to start. But like, if you start to get used to slowing down, you will start to be able to incorporate it. And then it'll bring you some clarity to what's going on in your external world. Because once you slow the internal world down, just like with my health, I could do it all by myself. I could slow my internal world down. How do I slow down the external world? Then all of these other issues come up, my people pleasing, my not wanting to disappoint people, my perfectionism, my status, my money, all of these things were coming up. So it's learning to choose you overall and then starting to implement these practices of slowing it down and making choices, big choices. And so for me, that was quitting my job and going through a breakup and letting go of the things that I so desired, but opening my eyes to the fact that they were feeding a life in which I no longer wanted. And I think you have to get there. There are so many people who don't even actually want love. Some people that are listening to this podcast right now think they want love, think they want success. And deep in your being, you don't. I thought I wanted peace. I didn't. And you have to get to the place where you're so over your shit. You're so over it. Almost to a place of desperation. Like when my clients come to me, like, I want you to be desperate to change because then I know you're going to change. But if you're half in, half out, I know you're probably not ready to change. And you have to be so sick of it, so sick of your chaotic life, so sick of these toxic relationships, so sick of not enjoying your career or not loving your day to day. And that is the moment where you actually make a choice. And it's as simple as that. These things are so simple, but hard to do. And it's as simple as making a choice for peace. Does this feed into my peace? Does this give me peace and joy? No. Let it go. No, I don't want to let it go. Okay, then you don't want peace. And it is as simple as awareness and then making a choice. Hard choices.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes it can be dangerous to oversimplify things, but sometimes you just have no other choice but to oversimplify things, whether it's like a relationship that is unhealthy or a job that isn't fulfilling you. You just have to look at things without emotions and just raw data on paper. You just have to look at them for the raw facts that they are and then make that decision as detached but still rationally minded as you can. And I think that in that pursuit is where the awareness can come from, or where you kind of hard encode that process into your behavior. Because it's one thing to have awareness, to know that you're unhappy in your job or your partner doesn't fulfill you or that the relationship isn't working, but it's another thing to then take action based on that. Now, that doesn't mean you need to take action right away, because what you said, it's about slowing down. You really have to reflect on these things and you have to feel them out. And like in my personal journey, I had been posting on TikTok, growing a following over the past 2 years. And even in my first 3 months of doing it, I could have technically quit my job and monetize that whole process, that whole journey. But I was still in the job that made me unhappy, where I felt unfulfilled, and ultimately I was underpaid. And I didn't realize it. I was so comfortable in that relationship as I was in the last relationship. I didn't want to leave because the idea of dating again is just so draining. The idea of submitting resumes and cover letters again is just so exhausting. And so that's why I stayed in that job for so long until it reached a boiling point where last December, I just quit on the spot. Something happened, and I was like, enough is enough. I
That's
have this opportunity here, and it's passing me by, and I'm not seizing it. And that is where I realized, like, I can only rationally and emotionally think about this for so long until I'm just procrastinating at this point and I'm not actually moving forward. And that's why at the start of this year in 2024, I actually started offering coaching full time. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have, I quit the job in the beginning of December. I didn't even have a website. In that month, my partner helped me make that website. Blessed to have her to do that. But after that point, I hit the ground running. And it's incredible because before I started that, I had savings, fortunately, but nobody prepares for this. They can only just be ready in case it happens. And so I'm fortunate that I was in a good financial position to make that decision because I know many people aren't and they feel simply stuck, whether it's because they're in a relationship where they feel like they can't move out or they can't leave. Maybe they're in debt. And I get that. At one point, I was $25,000 in debt too, until I actually started working on my attachment style. And then I realized there were similarities between how I viewed my relationships to my relationship with money. And that is something I really want us to talk about as well, because when that happened, it almost had like ripple effects in my greater life. Like when I finally got that debt paid off, I suddenly felt lighter and I felt in a better place to receive. So for me, there are a lot of different ways where I realized like I was so attached to money in the same way I was attached to other people. Like when I was more anxious and I always felt like I was going to lose people,
Mhm.
I always hoarded money, but I wasn't doing certain things to make that money grow. In the same way, I wasn't doing things in my relationships to water that plant. And I think for yourself, what are some of the ways? Because you have a background in this, like you've worked in sales, real estate, you understand like building wealth, but also about like budgeting and all of that. In the same ways we can do all of that same stuff for relationships, how can our attachment style play a role in money as well? And I'm curious, how has your attachment style played a role with your finances?
So funny you mentioned that you were hoarding money as like an anxious because I did the same exact thing. I treated money as if I was never going to get it again, or I didn't know if or when I was ever going to get it again. And granted, I was in real estate, which is an all commission career, and now I'm in coaching, but I still have more control than I think. And also, money is energy. And I realized, like, even I had so much money in savings. I'd gotten myself also out of my school debt, paid off my school loans. I bought my first property, then I bought my second property. And I just kept stacking up this money and working so hard, but I wasn't really letting it move. I did start to learn to let it move when I started investing money.
Mhm.
But I knew that those investments were going to bring me more money. So that's the only reason I did it. I knew it was a sure bet. I didn't spend money on myself. I didn't know how to spend my money to enjoy it. Money flows with joy. Money flows with pleasure. Money is self-worth. And what is self-worth? Your your knowing of how much you're worthy of good things, just like we talked about earlier. And so your money, just like your attachment style, is directly correlated with what you believe you are worthy of. And when I was running that anxious pattern, I had took what everybody does usually when they break a pattern, is the pendulum swing. So I was hoarding my money, strong grips on my money, and just, I had a lot of money, but I never felt secure, which just, like, what's the point? What's the point of having money and never feeling good about it or never feeling abundant? I always felt like I was broke. And even I took my friend one day telling me, because I was like shopping and I was like, no, I can't buy this, I can't buy that. She goes, Lauren, you act like you're broke. And I was like, I do, don't I? She goes, you're not broke. And I was like, okay, thank you for calling me out. So it took her saying that for me to then take the pendulum swing. Whereas I used to look at my bank account every single day, every single cent that was going in and out, I stopped looking at my bank account. I stopped tracking my finances. I started spending my money without even looking. I go to I love Whole Foods. That's like my jam. And I go to Whole Foods and I just don't even look at the dollar amount. I'm like, whatever, $250 for a week of groceries for just little old me. Like, no big deal. That's kind of a big deal. And so I just went all the way to the other side. But like any journey in life, like it taught me how to spend my money.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was just, without conscious maturity, just spending it frivolously, avoidant, wasn't looking at it at all. I was everything, all the bills were on auto pay because I had this big savings that I had saved up when I also started coaching. And I knew I was making enough to pay the bills, but like all the other stuff, I was just like, whatever. And so I was just crossing my fingers, really. And now I've come to this more secure place. So you kind of watch it follow, because I don't know fully. I think I'd have to really think about it. I'm even being avoidant, not even thinking about it. I haven't dated since my last breakup in 7 months. I made that conscious decision to take a break, not date. And is it avoidant? Am I avoidant right now? I don't know. Right. But I think I took a pendulum swing, right? Like I was dating, I was in relationships. I've always been a relationship girl. And I just think every journey serves its purpose, because now with that, I'm able to come to a secure place with money and be able to track my expenses. Oh, this is how much I spent this month. Oh, this is how much I made this month, and come to a clearer understanding and not be so afraid to look at the things. I think sometimes we are so afraid to look at our weaknesses or look at our downfalls or look at the money that's going in and out because we don't want to address the issue. And when you come to that more secure place, you look at the details because you're confident in yourself that you're able to go through hard times and do hard things, whatever you need to do to make it work. And again, that's a relationship. You do whatever it takes to make it work. Just like the money in your account, you want a certain life, do what it takes to get it. And so I find that for my anxious clients, they're more anxious with money. My avoidant clients, they don't really care much about it. They're not really looking at their money. They're spending more freely. And I found it fascinating, even in myself and how it showed up for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think as someone who at first was anxious, or at least thought they were only anxious, I realized, like, as I was healing my attachment style, but also becoming more informed about personal finance, saving, budgeting, and investing, that the way I viewed relationships was the exact same way I viewed money. And at first, I hoarded money, but then I made really emotional decisions. Like at one point, I would be so stressed about all of this debt that I had and how I needed to pay it off. And it had to be paid off right away because I was stressed in that moment that I wasn't focused on how I was feeling. And so not long after, I would go and make an impulsive purchase. You know, whether it was like a new fancy toy or going out for dinner or whatever it was all short term. And it wasn't until as I started to, go to therapy, heal my attachment style, but then also realize, hey, I actually am kind of still a little anxious, but now maybe a little bit more avoidant than I thought I was. I discovered I was fearful avoidant, but I also viewed money in that same way. And I would fluctuate wildly between the anxious side with money and the avoidance side. And it wasn't until I started to heal both of those sides in me that the way I viewed money started to change equally to how I viewed relationships. And to kind of go back to what you said earlier, like love isn't about latching on, but relationships partly are an economic decision at the end of the day.
Mm.
You are marrying, if you get married or you're dating, you're getting into a relationship with this person and you come with all of their emotional baggage, but all of their financial baggage, equally as much as all of the opportunities that come with those. And when I started to realize that people can be both emotional investments, but also financial ones, I started to pick and choose my partners more wisely. And by doing that, I indirectly taught myself to slow down, to not attach too quickly to people that were only like causing butterflies in me or who were giving me the attention and validation I so desperately needed at that time. And I think it's really good that you've taken this time to not date because when I went through my breakup, it wasn't until like 9 or 10 months afterward that I finally got on the apps. I finally started dating because I went from being so enmeshed in this really intense relationship to then being completely isolated by myself,
Mhm.
right? I spent the most time with myself. Of course, I had my dog. That was great. That helped a lot. But a lot of the time I was alone with myself and my thoughts. And like TikTok was a huge healing part of that. Like for me, that was my connection with the outside world. But I spent a lot of time in my apartment working on myself and just thinking and reprogramming. But then also, as you said, injecting joy into my life.
Yeah.
And money does play a role in that. And that's where I learned that there is a healthy medium between excessive spending and excessive saving. You can, and it really comes down to reframing. Like when you have the ability to reframe how you spend, you are spending more consciously with more awareness, but you're also indirectly teaching yourself to have a more secure relationship with money and yourself. And when you have a secure relationship with yourself, you feel like it doesn't matter what happens in life, you still got your back at the end of the day. Even if you get dinged on one investment and you lose some money, you know that another investment might pay off and you recoup all of those losses. And it's the same thing with relationships. Like you lose out on the experience of that continued relationship, but the experience you've gained in that process can also be seen as an investment. It's like the knowledge you gain about yourself and other people, but also the world in which we exist in, because all of that is interrelated, right? We're
Mhm.
really all just doing the best we can with the resources we have. And
Right.
this isn't to say that just because someone listening or watching may be like in poverty or have a lot of debt, that it's their fault for being in that place. It's totally not. Like in the same way we don't get to choose where we start on the economic ladder, it's the same way we don't get to choose our attachment style. It really is all dependent on which family you're born into at what time in that economic journey. And it's just the reality of the cards we've been dealt. And it's the same thing as how all of us, it's on us to heal our own attachment styles. It's also on all of us to assess how we spend money and how we save. And I understand if some people don't have as much as others. Like, it's totally understandable. My mother, she came from South America and she had no money when she emigrated to Canada. And I get that. I get what it's like to not have resources, but you still have to do a little bit each and every day to make more opportunities for yourself in the future. And that applies to finances, your relationships, but also the relationship with yourself. And all of that is related. And when you eventually get to a place where you can see that without shaming yourself and judging yourself, but also feeling like a victim, then you can actually start to make like really informed decisions about all of that. And that was the biggest thing about my healing journey was learning that I have control to a degree. I have some say in what happens in my life. So, again, thank you for sharing that. It's really amazing that you came to some of those revelations when it came to like your finances, because all of that is happening as you're just going through life, right? Like, it's not like, oh, this is the chapter of my finances and it's just that. It's like there's overlap. It's like sometimes you lose people and you gain people along the way, right? So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm kind of curious if you had one tip to help people heal their relationship with money, what would it be?
Open up your mind to the possibility that you can have as much money as you want. I had so much resistance around wanting $1 million. I was like, me, $1 million? Like it just couldn't come out of my mouth. And I think that's a really good direction when you're trying to manifest or you're trying to like speak out loud what it is you desire and it feels wrong coming out. Just know that there's blocks there. That's a compass. Like you've got blocks. If you close your eyes and you're trying to envision your future and you can't see it, there's a block. So it's okay to start small, but it took me a while. Even after this breakup, I could never clearly visualize myself getting married, getting a ring on my finger. I could not see it. Always knew I was going to get married and have kids, like deep down in my heart, but I could never visualize it until this last breakup. And now I know for a fact I'm going to get married and have kids. I know it. It's just, that's what's going to happen. And the same thing with money. Like, know that as much money as you want is possible for you, because the only thing holding you back is the thought that it's not possible and that you're not worthy of it. It's the same thing with love. And if you feel guilty for wanting this money, just know that the more money you spend nourishes the world by nourishing other companies to make this world flow and help people do their missions and their purposes, because it's a beautiful thing. Even just something like using a cell phone, like the person who created Apple, like that was his mission in life. And to be able to feed that through paying for the cell phone and whatever else it might be. My couch, I love my couch, and whoever created it and made it, I'm very happy and thankful for them. And I want that money to nourish them and their business. And if you start to think like that, you stop feeling so guilty for wanting money, but work on those emotions that are in the way and those blocks that are in the way. Because when I say anything is possible, like you may want to sit here and say, not for me, that very thought is keeping you from opening the channels to all of the miracles and the magic that's in the world. And it is up to you if you want to believe in magic or not. But I do. And that's my biggest piece of advice is open your mind to the possibility that as much as you want and you desire, you can have it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's also important to kind of double down on that and sort of to say, like, just because you need certain necessities in life, like say an iPhone, which come from sometimes these big organizations that can equally do as much good as they can do harm. Just because you want success and money for yourself doesn't mean you can't do good as well. And so, like for me, repairing my relationship and perspective with money, because at one point I used to think like millionaires were scum and billionaires were evil. And to a degree, you know, there is an excessive point where it's like, how much money and wealth do you truly need to have? But just to have money for yourself to do your mission, whatever it is. Like for me, I want to create wealth so that I can invest in businesses that want to do good. Like whether it's in the relationship space that want to bring people together or to create centers for community aid. Like there are a lot of different ways where you can repair your relationship with money to do the good that you want to see in the world. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Like you don't need to fit into the traditional mold, especially the mold that traditional finance tells you need to fit into in order to create success for yourself and other people. And that's really what it comes down to is like money, as you said, it's energy. It's a mechanism to transfer value from one party to the next. And what you do with that is what matters the most. And so I love that story. It's been incredible to hear. And so, yeah, I'm glad we kind of ended up on that note. Like, I think money, it's still a taboo subject and even taboo for people for themselves, right? Kind of like, as you said, sometimes it does come from a block and maybe some of these preconceived notions that we either genuinely believe or we've been programmed to believe through society. But really just being curious about that and questioning what it is you would do if you had that money, I think is the first step to getting there. And then figuring out everything along the way. You don't need to have all the answers, even if you're not fully paid off in your debt yet. And that's what my life was like. I was like, I have all this debt. I don't know how I'm going to get there. But then it's like a snowball, right? In the same way, compound interest can grow money. You can also apply that to debt. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. So, Lauren, thank you for sharing that. While we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure catching up with you. For everybody that's listening and watching, why don't you share a little bit about what you're working on right now and how people can find you and connect with you online?
Absolutely. I have a few options. I am mainly on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. Both of them are at LawPlante, LAUPLANTE. And in the link in my bio, you'll find all of the options to work with me. I am launching a mastermind next month, and that is all about breaking out of your patterns and moving through your blocks, whether that be money blocks, love blocks, emotional blocks, success blocks. And I also offer one-on-one. And then I do have a free masterclass and I do free webinars. I used to do them monthly, but I think that I'm going to slow them down and maybe do them bi-monthly. But I do offer free webinars. If you follow me, you'll have all of that there, and you can check out my website.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing all that work. I'm sure you're helping a lot of people now and will continue to do so. So for anyone that's interested, make sure to connect with Lauren on social media. I'll include the links to her social media pages and website in the description so you can check those out. Lauren, again, thank you so much. And to everyone else, I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Lauren. Take care.